This program is brought to you by Pussy Magnets.
Put a midge on your friends with a pussy magnet.
Oh, hey! Welcome, 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 my lovely lumps. Or should I say lovely labs? I don't know, they're both good. I'm so thrilled to have you here in the Labia Lounge to yarn about all things sexuality, womanhood, holistic health, and everything in between. Your legs. Oh, cringe. I couldn't help myself. Anyway, I am your host, Freya Graff, and I am a holistic sex coach and educator and yoni mapping therapist. So basically, I make my living massaging vaginas and teaching people about sex. Yeah, pretty cool. So as you can imagine, we are going to have vag loads of real chats with real people about real shit. So buckle up, you're about to receive the sex ed that you'd never had and have a bloody good laugh while you're at it. Before we get stuck in though, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this podcast, the Menang people. It's an absolute privilege to be living and creating dope podcast content on Noongar country, and I pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, if y'all are ready, let's flap and do this. Oh, is there such thing as having too many vagina jokes in the one intro? Whatever. I'm leaving it in. It's my podcast.
Don't panic, you're not broken. Your sex education was a piece of shit. Get your flaps out and pull up a couch. It's the Labia Lounge.
Hey there, my lovely, luscious labial legends. Oh, that was a doozy. I didn't expect that to be quite so, elaborate alliterations. Obviously my thing, as you can tell by the name of the podcast. Alliteration really gets me wet, so get used to it. Anyway, back to my lovely, luscious guest for today, Jema Lee. Let me tell you about this awesome woman. Jema Lee is a menstrual cycle expert, qualified Ayurvedic coach, and the creator of Wellsome. For 13 years, she's helped guide women in over 22 countries, damn, show off, to embrace their monthly cycles, also their menstruals, fuck, this is a shit show, anyway, and deepen body awareness through personalised coaching, online courses, retreats, and workshops. She's known as the down-to-earth, raw, and authentic teacher who makes periods fun. Her teachings are analogy field, helping to make the complicated stuff practical, easy, and memorable. Located in Australia, like me, Jema's a daytime mermaid, a full-time human who spends her days coaching, dancing, and creating. And might I add, Jema has an epic podcast, which I was just telling her before we jumped on the recording that I'm a massive fan of, and I send to lots of friends pretty regularly because it's just so valuable and down to earth and practical, basically, like I just said. So I would highly recommend checking out her podcast as well, and I'll pop that in the show notes. But welcome into the lounge, Jema. Pull up a cushion.
Thank you so much for having me. I just had to put myself on mute because I was laughing so hard at your intro. I love it. Thank you. All those L's are definitely a tongue twister, but thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Yeah, I'm still kind of new at this podcasting thing, and I'm kind of embracing the informal rawness of it all. I feel like hopefully people are like, oh, that's pretty relatable, rather than like, wow, this bitch is unprofessional. So today we're going to cover...
It's perfect.
Yeah, thank you. Great. I think I'm feeling pretty like loosey-goosey because we had such a great yarn before we pressed record, so I'm pretty comfortable.
She's limber and ready.
So today we're going to cover the basics of cycle tracking, why you would do it, how you can benefit, how to use your cycle as a secret superpower, how to live in tune with your body and how this will impact your life, and how to cultivate better body confidence and body literacy through being allies with your cycle, using some simple tools and principles that we're going to give you. It's going to be a juicy one. I'm really excited because I find this all just such valuable information that I don't think we really get taught, or, it's not talked about that much. And I think I used to be pretty inclined to resent my period and find it really inconvenient at the least and just a disaster. Anyway. So
we know what you mean.
Yeah, you get it. God, I'm ovulating right now too. I should be at the top of my game. I feel like I'm just a hot mess, but
no, you're all too horny and your libido's too high to focus on that shit.
So yeah, speaking of the sort of different characteristics of, the seasons or the phases of our cycle, I'd love to dive into a bit of that. I've actually done an episode recently on exercising and moving your body for your cycle and how to use natural fertility awareness as contraception. So I did an interview with Dr. Madeline Turner and she walked us through the cycle stages. So I'd recommend going back and listening to that epi as well. But I would love, Jema, if you could give us a little rundown about the different seasons, as I like to call them, of the menstrual cycle. And their different characteristics, maybe a bit about the different expectations that we can have of ourselves and our own needs and energy and moods and stuff according to which season of our cycle we're in.
Good questions. So, hi, everyone. When it comes to the seasons of the cycle, this is completely my jam. So if you've never heard of me before and you're listening and you're like, who is this chick? I was the tomboy who grew up not wanting to really be a woman, and then I became a woman, and then I didn't want to wear skirts or dresses at the private school I went to. And, I rejected a lot of my feminine. And when I started to explore coming off the contraceptive pill and got PCOS, I really didn't know what my body was doing or what was going on. And I felt like I had an alien inside my body. I was like, get this thing out of me. And so when I discovered the seasons of the cycle, it actually took me back to when I studied ancestral health. So ancestral health is how our ancestors treat, heal, cure, and diagnose diseasement in the body. Very different to allopathic and Western medicine practices today. And one of my teachers was very much about, women going through phases and 4 phases and how they kind of linked with the seasons and how you would eat differently in each phase of the season, similar to how you would in the outer seasons. And so this is where I initially learned about the seasons. So I know everyone learns about the seasons in different ways, but this was my initial teaching of it. Now there's lots of different people who talk about it in books, and I guess they've all learned from their own teachers. But with the seasons, they link in with the Western seasons. So if you've listened to that previous episode that you mentioned, Freya, about the allopathic way, so you've got menstruation, follicular, ovulation, and luteal, the 4 phases. Those 4 phases can be linked with what we call the 4 outer seasons. Now, it gets a little bit technical because there is actually 5 outer seasons. The 5th, most people are not even aware of, but we just like to focus on the 4 when I'm teaching. Inside cyclical school and the Wellsome Academy that I run, I open up into the 5th season, but to keep it really simple, we just go with the 4. Is that cool with you?
Totally.
Oh, the KISS theory, keep it simple, stupid, always works. So with the 4 seasons, the first one is menstruation, and that's actually probably going to be me today. I'm actually sitting here on day 28 of my cycle. I am checking in, feeling quite menstrual, actually. I'm definitely in my yin. It's also the new moon day today. We're recording on the new moon, and I can feel my energy dropping downwards and my womb space becoming quite heavy, and that's where the basis of my root chakra is. So I can definitely feel that downward pull in, energy force through the Sushumna Nadi, which is the central energy lines and channels in your body. So menstruation, Western medicine might call it that, but in the seasons we call this inner winter. So after inner winter comes inner spring, which is our follicular phase. After inner spring comes inner summer, which is our ovulation phase. And after inner summer comes inner autumn, our luteal phase. So do you want me to guide you through all of those characteristics of each season as one season on its own?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good way to go about it.
Okay, cool. Let's do that. So winter, we'll kick it off because that's where we all begin. That's where we start cycle tracking at the very beginning of our menstrual bleed. So this winter time, characteristically with the season, it's very much, I call it the bear season. It's where you're the bear in your cave. Some people might have heard of the red tent or the red cave. I like to just refer, because I teach a lot of kids too, this is the bear, where you are just hibernating in your cave and you are more internal than you are external. So this means that what would we normally do in winter? What would a bear do when the bear would be in winter? And that's provide warmth, that's build a fire, that's eat and consume warm foods, that's move your body in a nice, slow, restorative pace to conserve energy. That's where we feel quite reflective in the darkness of the cave, which is, our deepest part of our yin phase of energy. We are very reflective. So traditionally, they would say this is when you are the most connected with your intuition. This is when your intuition energy is actually a lot more illuminated. So listen to your guidances, listen to what's coming up for you, and really be guided by your body at this particular time. So something that's really interesting that a lot of people miss with the inner winter phase around guidance and intuition is that anytime you're making a really big life decision as a menstruator, it's always good to reflect on this during your inner winter time. So when I was writing the program, and it's now the membership, my group coaching membership program called the Well Women Academy, I actually took about 4 menstrual cycles to write that program. And it started off as a 6-week program, so it's quite simple to write, but I kept just waiting until my menstrual time came and I was sitting in my inner winter to actually really trust my guidance of my intuition rather than the masculine outwardness of me, my extravagant side, being like, it's going to do this, it's going to have this. I was like, whoa, you're going to make it too over the top. And I wanted my intuitive guidance to really nurture that. And so that's one thing we can do, one of many things we can do during that inner winter time. So our inner winter time then progresses through to our inner spring. And our inner spring is our follicular phase. This is when menstruation is changed and ceased. And what you'll generally find is everyone transitions into this second season with like, oh my God, I feel like I'm back in my body and like I want to go outside today and I feel like I want to move and I'm going to eat something different for a change. And so this change that we feel is that transition into inner spring. That transition is the beginning of our yang phase of our cycle. And this spring-like feeling is I call this the dolphin phase. This is where you're like the person in the water, you're playful, you're creative, you want to have fun, you want to be around people in your own little pod. And so I love using the dolphin as an analogy in your springtime because spring, think about it in the outer seasons as the weather changes around you seasonally in the year, is that when you go from winter to spring, you're like, oh my God, I can finally get out of these jumpers and I can actually put a t-shirt on. And you're like, thank goodness, I'm so pale and I feel dry and I want to put my skin in the sun. And that's the same feeling that we have in this little phase of transition between winter and spring. And I always give analogies when I teach and educate because they make it so much more memorable and you're much more likely to remember it. But everyone recognizes that feeling. And so that feeling of wanting to be outside and seeing, you're like, yep, I'm going to actually like let my hair out today. And, I might even have a shower like before I get into the day today instead of waiting till like 4 p.m. And so this is that spring-like energy. Naturally, in this time of our cycle, we're super creative, like I was saying. So it's a really good time if you have a hobby or you are creative in your work in any way, or you're creative at home, or you like making new recipes or painting or whatever it is. This is a good time to actually begin new projects and start being creative and cultivating those ideas. Also, a really good time to try something new. And this is all because of the change in our hormones. So as our estrogen rises and our FSH kicks in, that helps build us with confidence and feeling, extravagant and wanting to be playful and, wanting to try new things. So that's our spring phase. Our summer is, people call it the peak of your cycle and the peak season. It is the peak of your season, but it's not in the middle. So a lot of people say, well, it's going to take me 2 hours to hike to the top, so therefore it's going to take me 2 hours to come back. But the peak, the summer is in your menstrual cycle is not always in the middle. But this particular phase of your cycle is between 3 to 4 days in length. So it's the shortest phase of all of them. And this depends a lot on your fertile cycle, your fertile phase. You would know about this, Freya, about cervical mucus and blah, 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 all that stuff. But with the seasons, your summertime is when you have been out playing around and you're like, oh my God, I am like so sexy right now. You catch yourself like in the glass reflection as you're walking by the shops. And you're like, girl, have you seen what I look like today? Yeah. So that's that summer feeling. And that feeling is really about feeling voluptuous. And that doesn't mean in your body size, that means in your energy. So that's when you like feel sexy, you feel a little bit sassy. I call this the Beyonce phase. I also like to call this, there's a film clip from her, I think it's her Lemonade album, where she's in a yellow dress and she's walking out of this massive mansion down the like this huge flight of stairs, and all of a sudden as she opens the door, all this water gushes out through the door. I have to make a meme on this. I definitely have to make a meme on this for my Instagram. But like she walks out this door and it's like, hello boys, ovulation has arrived. And that's every time I see or think of that clip in that film clip, I'm just like, that is inner summer to a T. Plus she's wearing a yellow dress and that helps with the visuals. But I like to call this like the lioness or the lion season, because you're ready to pounce, you're very in charge, you're very outward, but you're also very slow and sensual as well. So there's lots of different facets that come into this ovulation season. And because we're not talking about like the Western allopathic way, I'm not talking about conception and conceiving and the fact that you're ovulating and how that all works. But energetically, when we look at the aspects of summer is really about putting yourself out there. It's about being with your community. It's about being seen. It's about having outward energy as opposed to menstruation, which is inward energy. So that's a really good time where you might help friends who have little kids and you're like, I've got more energy at this time of my cycle, so I'm going to put myself out there. Or it might be a time when you launch a product in your business, or you pitch yourself to your boss, or there's lots of examples, but that's inner summer for you. Then inner summer, what comes after inner summer is inner autumn. And inner autumn is, for some people, the longest phase of your cycle, and then for others, it's not the longest phase. So this all comes back to knowing your cyclical nature and obviously learning about your own natural fertility if you are following natural contraceptive processes and, methods. So this autumn phase generally is between 10 and 14 days long. For a healthy cycle, that's correct. It would be, 10, 11 to 12, my God, I can't talk. Between 10 and 11, you gave me the I can't talk thing. I'm kidding. I'm joking. It's not your fault. But it's anywhere from 10, 11, 12, 13 to 14 days. So anywhere between that time frame is the length that your autumn phase will be. But this is also known as the premenstrual phase. Dun, 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 dun. I always think of like the shark, like dun, 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 as we move through inner autumn. And it doesn't have to be like that. I actually love inner autumn. I just spent 6 days sleeping in my van, traveling with my partner in my inner autumn. And most people are like, oh, no, I can't do that. Like that would just be a nightmare. I'd be too snappy. I'd be too irritated. I'll be a bitch. But it's not the point. Like inner autumn is so beautiful when you understand the ethics of inner autumn. So autumn is our harvest season. If you look at traditional like Chinese medicine, autumn is all about harvesting and gathering and preparation. And that's the same thing we can do in this season as we prepare for our next menstrual bleed. So this is the get shit done phase of your cycle. This particular time is good to finish little jobs and tasks off. And everyone would have done this at some stage in their life when you're like, you know what? Especially with COVID, I'm just working at home. I'm just going to go make some lunch. And then you open, the cutlery drawer to pull out a fork so you can eat your salad. And then you're like, oh, that's a bit dirty under those forks. 2 hours later, the whole fucking kitchen is cleaned and redecorated and you've done no work or eaten lunch. And that's the inner autumn feeling where you are so present, but you're also, I know I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and I've got to get this thing finished, and I've got to do that. And it's also a bit of a similar feeling that comes about for women who are pregnant in their final season before they transition into the season of labor. And and birthing, where they're like nesting and getting things done and organize everything so they can completely relax when birthing time arrives. And so for us, our inner autumn cyclically is one, a preparation for the experience of pregnancy and birth and preparing for that. But it's also an experience of preparing ourselves to menstruate so that we can allow extra time for honoring menstruation. So even if you're a mom and you've got little kids, honoring yourself by blocking out 15 minutes in your menstrual time means that you could do the stuff that you'd have to do that 15 minutes a couple of days earlier. So you have the 15 minutes spare. But inner autumn is also, when we look at food, it's a time when everyone's like, oh my God, I just like this witch comes through me and she just eats everything in the pantry. And like, I have no control over it. I have no idea where she comes from. She just turns up unannounced and just like, poof, everything's gone. And that is another emotional, energetic side of us during our inner autumn phase. And there's lots of different reasons why a lot of women experience that, but it's not normal, it's common. So knowing how you feel and being present and connected with yourself at every stage of your cycle in all the 4 phases is really beneficial at helping you, bring your body back into balance and harmony and living in a sattvic state, which is ultimately everybody's goal.
Yeah. Awesome.
Seasonal rant over.
You did an amazing job of that, really. Yeah, like I'm so fascinated by this stuff. And I, like when you're talking about that sort of feathering the nest and preparing to either go into the menstrual cave or preparing to, become pregnant, you get this urge to just like clean and get shit done and kind of tick all the boxes and get your ducks in a row. Like I remember learning about that and being like, oh, surely not. When I'm premenstrual, I just like can't be fucked doing anything, I'm irritable and this and that. And then, I started tracking my cycle. I started getting more and more into this. And I did start noticing, I was so surprised that I was noticing I would just get these weird urges to clean and I'd start doing one little task and then it would turn into like a whole big clean. I'm like, oh, I'm in the zone. May as well just do it while I'm at it. And then I'd be like, whoa, that's a thing. I can't believe that
it is.
I've read about this happening and this is actually happening. But it is interesting.
It does happen.
Yeah. Which is so helpful because I can't be fucked cleaning most of the time. So when I do get a hit to just like go nuts, it's very useful because then, then it's done and it's actually really satisfying.
It is. And it's a good way of channeling energy too.
Yeah.
It's a really good way of channeling energy and you're present. So you just pop on some music. It's the same as if a guy, and this is a bit stereotyping, but if a male was, I'm really frustrated about something that's going on at work and I've had a bad argument with my boss, and it's like they just go boxing with their best mate and just channel the energy and release it. Whereas, I like doing that sometimes too. But, for me, I'm just like, it helps release. Like even me doing the same thing, but spring cleaning in the garden, I could spend 5 hours just like ripping freaking weeds out. And I was just like, going to kill all these caterpillars. Sorry, Buddha. And then I do all this other stuff. And all of a sudden I've not listened to anything. I've just been outside in nature. I've been channeling the energy. And then I feel like, I feel so clear now.
Totally. It's very therapeutic. It's like a moving meditation. And it's like this epic feeling once everything's kind of done and you've just been really, really productive, because then you can just sort of sit back in your beautiful clean space with all of your ducks in a row and bleed, and but the thing is, like I was going to mention that sometimes this isn't exactly how it goes. And I actually feel like, maybe if I haven't nourished myself enough or done enough self-care or sort of lived in a way that's kind of taking into account my cycles and my needs, my cycle and my phases and my needs in the different phases, then I will rock up at, the spring and summer seasons and just be wrecked still and get like maybe one day of like, yay, I'm ovulating, fucking Beyonce out. And then I'm straight back into fucking premenstrual, and I'd love to chat about that a little bit, but also, the benefits of knowing about your seasons and how to work with them and live in alignment with them, and like how that then can can have like this ripple effect on your life, and you can just be like a way more effective and, I guess, balanced, content human. Like, what are, you know, can we chat about some of the benefits of like living in tune with these seasons, in regards to like feeling an increased connection to our bodies, and then being able to manage our energy levels better? And then, you know, even stuff like, you know, can it help with PMS symptoms, for instance, and things like that? Like, I know you got a lot to say on this.
Where do I start? This is such a good question. I call it cyclical living. This is why I created Cyclical School, you know, the menstrual cycle coaching course, teaching people how to become certified menstrual cycle coaching or coaches, is because we have always lived in a cyclical way. And through my Ayurvedic studies and ancestral studies and womb wisdom studies and shamanic womb wisdom stuff, is that the more and more I connect with the Eastern approach and the ancestral approach of health, the more I see how displaced we are from the earth. Now, that might have made you a little bit confused, but all that means is that it comes back to one of the Ayurvedic philosophies is that you are not on nature, you are of nature. So when you think that you are of nature, this is, you are part of the earth. You are part of the trees. You are part of the air. You're part of the water. You're part of the fire. You're part of everything, all of the elements. And we often, in the Western world particularly, are not connected with any of these things. You know, we don't rise and set with the cyclical nature of the sun and the moon. We don't connect with the cyclical nature of the seasons of the year. We don't connect with, actually just on that, with the seasons of the year. A great way to expand on that is that, you know, who still drinks smoothies in winter? A lot of people. And that's not a winter food. So that's actually not living cyclically. You know, who drinks soup in summer? Hardly anybody, unless you're really sick. And that's because that's not cyclical. So I used to teach, they were called the ancestral seasonal classes for each of the outer seasons. And this is before I got into menstrual work. So it was actually just a really nice transition, because the ways that we live in the outer world, if we applied it all very easily at each of our 5 seasons in the outer world, when we apply them to our inner world, everything will change. And so a lot of people say, but I can't relax and I can't stop and I can't change my work schedule. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just keep tracking our cycles, how we're going, and let's just see what happens in a month's time. And what happens is they're in the same position. They're still frustrated, like you were saying, pushing yourselves, having one day you're like, oh my God, I feel amazing, I'm so sexy. And then all of a sudden you're like back to like, fuck my life. Excuse my language. I'm really like letting the words just fly today, aren't I?
Yeah.
It's meant to be then. But, you know, it really is important to just recognize that women are cyclical. Now, I say women, but I refer to everybody born with a womb. Now, the interesting thing is that we all come from a womb, whether you are born with male parts or whether you are born with female parts, we all exist and come from a womb. And you'll probably agree with this, Freya, that we all have a womb, regardless of your gender or how you identify. And that can be an energetic womb or it can be a physical womb. So for menstruators, our cyclical nature is so much more physically embedded in our bodies. And so when we actually connect with our menstrual cycle, we can start to see the ebbs and flows and changes when we allow ourselves to ebb and flow and change. Now, even if you look at Ayurveda, which is like the mother of yoga, which was birthed before Chinese medicine, which could just be referred to as traditional Indian medicine, but it refers to life science. And they teach really well that everything changes and nothing is static or the same. And whenever you apply staticness or sameness to anything, things become unbalanced. So let's look at what happens in staticness and sameness in the world that we live in today. Most people have a 9-to-5 job. And I say most, that's changing a lot since the pandemic. But in general, most of the population has some kind of, static job. And what that static job means is they work the same set of hours a week, and then they generally work the same set of days or the same set of hours of the day. And so that creates staticness. Now, you can still have that staticness and be cyclical, but it's important to be aware of the staticness in your life. So if you do that and then you apply, you know what, I'm going to eat the same thing for lunch every day. And I'm also going to eat the same thing for dinner. I might change it up a little bit, but mostly the same thing every night for dinner. Breakfast, always the same. What happens is you're actually moving your body in the masculine cyclical way as opposed to the feminine cyclical way. And it's important to recognize this, is that born masculines, the males, because we all have masculine and feminine, polarity energy within us, but male part, so I look at my partner B, man with a penis, he has a cyclical nature too, but his cycle runs 24 hours, whereas my cycle runs anywhere from 4 to 4.5, sometimes even 5 weeks long. So when we look at that nature, it's going to be different. And so whilst men, and I'm just going to use those like core words, man and woman, but for those men, those non-menstruators who don't have menstrual parts, naturally they just live in the same kind of thing every freaking day. They eat the same food every day. They just work out what gym they want to go to. They're like, oh, I like this gym. I'm just going to keep going to this gym. 5 years later, still at the same gym. They generally do the same kind of thing all the time. And that's because that's how their cyclical world works. There's nothing wrong with that. But today, diets are created by man and by born penises, really, by men who have penises. But so diet culture comes from mostly males. Movement culture, Pilates, yoga, most sports are all born with born as male sports. One of the only sports that I know of, and I'd love to learn of some more if anyone wants to call up the hotline and let us know right now, is that 132218. I don't know, I just made that up. But is synchronized swimming. That was a female sport to provide, it was a born female sport, and it wasn't even called a sport. It was an entertainment to provide entertainment to people, watching or viewing. And that is pretty much a woman-only sport. But and even netball, it was seen as a woman's sport. But most sports are designed for men, and women now do them. So look at skateboarding, look at BMX, look at basketball, look at football, look at cricket. And so what happens is that really in the Western world, we buy into the masculine culture because we live in the patriarchy world, which is masculine. We no longer have a matriarchal world. We're shifting towards it, but we no longer live in that kind of style of essence anymore. And so what happens is when women start to discover their menstrual cycles, to bring it back to the cycle, is that they're like, but I can't change that because I've been doing it all the time and I feel good doing that. And that's what everyone else does. And they have a good body and they look hot and lean and thin and toned. So I want to look like that too. So I'm going to apply that because it worked for that person. But the challenge is that we are not the same. And we need to understand our cyclical essence. Because even if I look at myself and my best friend Amber or my other best friend Jess, the three of us are all very, very different. So what works for Jess in her journey of preconception to prepare her body to have a healthy ovulation is going to be very, very different to what I do. And to throw a few little cherries on the top of this cake, I haven't even talked about the spiritual or the energetic essences of these, theories around cyclical living, because we just need to understand the foundation of how we live our life needs to be cyclical, and we need to allow the process of flow, surrender, and allowing. So what that means is that if you get to inner autumn, and here's a great example for me, it's day 28 for me. 2 days ago, I was driving home from being on our van trip, and I got home. My partner and I, we ate the same dinner. Normally I ate a little bit less in quantity than him. We ate the same sized meal. And afterwards I was like, I am so freaking hungry. I'm like, I need to eat. So I ate like a whole punnet of raspberries. And then I was like, still hungry. I had yogurt with blueberries. And I was like, babe, are you hungry? He's like, no. I was like, geez, my inner autumn is really getting me good. And so I know that this is my theory, right? This isn't science. This is my theory, that we welcome in additional, nourishment and food and eating before we begin bleeding, so that when we do begin menstruation, we can surrender to menstruation and we have a store of energy through our macronutrient content that we previously consumed. But what happens is that we're like, oh, it's breakfast time, but better eat breakfast, whether you're hungry or not. Oh, it's dinner time, better eat dinner. And so we live in this cyclical, nature of like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But traditionally, we didn't do that. We ate when we had food and we ate when we were hungry. And this is how we can be more of nature rather than just on nature, is that don't forget your body is an animal, and that animals eat when they're hungry in the wild, not when the sun is going down at a certain time.
Totally.
Anyway, rant over, because I could just let's keep riffing. There's some ways that cyclical living is super important, because ultimately, to sum everything up about why I would encourage all menstruators to live in a cyclical way, is that it helps bring your body back into harmony and balance. And anything that is a disruption to that, so a cycle sign, a discomfort, that's all because there's an imbalance in your body. And so the way of living is we are constantly juggling the balance of health. So there is no end goal, because most people are like, I need to get to this goal of health. There is no end goal. The goal is consistent. The goal is I am here to create balance and harmony. So how does my body need balance today? Then how does my body need balance today? So as you move through every day, you're asking the same question, but the answers will be slightly different.
Yeah, exactly. I think we can get very regimented and really sort of fall back on this structure of like, I eat this every morning for breakfast and I eat at this time, and work starts at this time, so I have to eat before then, and then I have a lunch break at this time, so I've got to eat then. And like sometimes that can't be helped, but it does sort of make it trickier to actually listen to your body and when you need to eat and how much and what kinds of food. And that's been a sort of practice that I've been bringing in more, is like actually, feeling into what I feel like my body needs to be eating, what I'm craving. And it's tricky to differentiate between like, cravings that is just your like shitty gut bacteria being like, I want sugar. And actually like, I need more carbs right now because it's the evening and I'm going to have a better sleep with more carbs and I'm about to bleed. So blah, blah, blah. But it is like tricky, especially if you're, like I live with my partner who's a male, and it is interesting because I notice like he wants to eat different foods at different times. And in the beginning I was like, just, it's more convenient and it's easier if we just cook brekkie at the same time and I eat the same thing and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of the time we do that because he makes like amazing breakfasts and I'm not going to pass that up. But he often wants to eat earlier than I want to eat. And so I have started to just go, maybe just save me a plate, or like, don't worry, I'll fix myself something once my metabolism kicks in and I actually am hungry. And then, rather than trying to keep up with him and how much he's eating and when he's eating, we have totally different energy requirements, and he's on that 24-hour cycle. So I'm just having to be like, no, actually, like just because everyone else is doing this thing or just because he's doing that thing doesn't mean that that's right for me. I'm going to actually tune in with my body and try to, get better at listening to that. And same with like socializing and like energetically how much, I have to give in a social setting, whether I need to just like go, like we take two cars to a lot of things now because I pretty much never have as much social energy and like staying power as he does. So rather than that being sort of like, I want to go home, and I'm just like, fuck it, I'm going to take my own car, and then I can just leave when I need to leave, and I need to go and hibernate and be a little hermit again.
I love that.
And you can just be as out there and extroverted and social, and you can drink alcohol, whatever. I'm just I don't really drink alcohol almost ever. And I don't want to have to keep up with, I think in the past I've tried to keep up with him or with other people and the amount of energy they have, or maybe they're just more extroverted naturally. Maybe they're ovulating and they're really extroverted, and I'm, premenstrual, and I'm just like, I have nothing to give this situation. I need to just go home and read a book. So it's been a real practice for me of like learning how to navigate my fluctuations and my differing needs, and then also like self-acceptance and not beating myself up when I'm not feeling very social, or if I don't have a lot to give other people and I do need to go inwards and, rather than seeing it as like selfish, seeing it as like self-care.
Yeah, it's so true. And I love what you mentioned about your partner and taking 2 cars to an event and the whole breakfast situation, because a lot of people feel, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way in any way, but a lot of people, feel victim. They're like, oh, I have to eat breakfast at the same time, or I have to say yes to this, or I can't. And it's not the case. And it is possible to be in a heterosexual relationship with someone who's on a different cycle to you, even if you're in a same-sex relationship as a menstruator. So, for example, lesbians, you are both cyclical, but your cycles might not match up. So that's the same as being in a heterosexual relationship. So it's really important to work as a team. And I feel that anyone that partners with you, I would encourage them. One, you need to teach them about cyclical living. The way to do that is you need to know how to do cyclical living yourself and apply it and know about it and know what serves you and what doesn't serve you, so that then you can work as a team with it. But I work as a team. My partner B knows what meals are great during each phase of my cycle. He's even said when we went away in the van, knowing that it was going to be in autumn, he's like, oh, babe, it's going to be your autumn time, so you're probably going to want these meals. How about we make this, this, and this for dinner?
Oh, bless.
And, but that's because he's aware of it and he knows and he's seen that I work so much better in life, just daily life, not my job, when I'm honoring myself cyclically and I'm connected cyclically. And so, he last night went to the shops because he had to pick something up, and he brought back a block of chocolate, and I made a hot chocolate out of organic dark chocolate. And that's because I'm like, that's something that I love to do pre-autumn. It's also like 30 degrees and 100% humidity where I live. So it's not the time for hot drinks, but my body wants the nurturing love of a hot, warm drink. So it's all about applying things, and don't buy into the nature that like, oh, it's just hard for men, they just don't understand. They actually can understand, and they really want to learn when you give them the opportunity, and they want to help work as a team on it. And so this is why in the Well Women Academy, the membership program that I run, I teach classes with my partner B about how to introduce conversations to men and how to bridge the gap and how to work together as a team. And all of that stuff is actually foundational, because if you can do that as a partnership and you're a heterosexual couple as parents, you'll be able to pass that on to your children. And that's where we completely change the current experience of menarche, our first menstrual period experience, and the way that males currently, think about periods and menstrual cycles versus what they can do in supporting.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's so important, and they are eager to learn, and they want to, they want to help. Like I have a few ways that I do this. I mean, I talk about it all the time because it's my jam, but I also have like, I've created my own cycle tracking calendar chart that you can actually download. I'll pop a link. It's just a free PDF that you can print out, and I whack it on the fridge so he always knows where I'm at in my cycle. And then there's also there's some apps that do that as well, that send your partner, you can link up your partner's email and it'll send them a little bit of info at each season. But I feel like including them in the process and sort of having conversations about it. Like we're so on the hot chocho train. He makes a good hot chocolate. Yeah, it's so fucking valuable. And then they can also they feel involved, they feel included, they feel, rather than being like, oh my God, fuck, like the cycle, she's crazy at this time, or da, 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 they know what to expect. You can have an open dialogue around it. And there was something else I was going to say around, maybe it was the food thing. So I'm also developing a poster which will have the different seasons of your cycle and the sorts of foods that are really amazing to eat, so that it's just this visual, beautiful poster on the wall, and your partner can reference it, you can reference it and then try to incorporate some of those foods into the meals that you make at each stage. So that's in the works at the moment. I've actually got a really amazing artist on board.
Great idea.
Yeah. Because then
It's a great idea.
Up in the home, and say you've got a family and your kids and there's this poster and it's just this kind of thing that's around. And so the entire culture around the menstrual cycle and, you know, womanhood is just so much more reverent and I guess like present in the home, you know. So it's not just this secret thing that the woman has to deal with on her own. It's like right there, everyone can be part of it. Yeah, I just think that that's like the way we've got to go with it.
It really is. I actually have a guide like that inside like for the Well Women Academy that is specifically for men to use, and they can print that out and put it on the fridge. And yeah, that's what I think I created that back in 2017, 2018, and it works a treat. It really is so supportive for everybody who, you know, who does incorporate that, and it really helps bridge that gap and create a cyclical way of living in a household as a family. And that doesn't mean you need to be married. It's just creating a unit, a family unit, and it's really, really beautiful, and it does work. So I think that for everyone listening, if you're like, oh, I wish my partner was like that, regardless of their gender or how they identify, is that give them the opportunity. Yeah, like they only know what they were taught, and they were taught nothing about it. So give them the opportunity is what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They might surprise you as well, you know, if they've got those resources like posters and charts like that. So I'd love to like sort of just canvas the benefits regarding like PMS, because I've noticed that the more I live in tune with my cycle and the more I manage my energy and kind of, honor where I'm at and my needs. And I have the best time with my period. Like I do not get cramps. I don't get symptoms almost ever. And when I do, I know, like I've noticed now through charting and being aware of this, it's because I've pushed myself too hard in that autumn phase, or I've I've pushed too hard on the last cycle coming out of my menstrual phase and like wanted to run before I could walk kind of thing, and like leap into spring and summer when I really should have just like chilled the fuck out for another few days. And then I notice that my PMS will flare up. So what's your experience around, you know, how living in tune with your cycle can help with PMS symptoms?
So I like to call PMS cycle signs, because they're all just messages to your body, and they don't technically just occur before premenstrual. So they're not just before you menstruate. They can occur at any time of your cycle. Cool. And these are all signs that your body is like knocking on your front door being like, Jema, this is going on. Can you please help us? And when we don't address it, then it manifests. And then all of a sudden the knocks on your front door become thuds. And then eventually they just like, it's like the SWAT team like bursting the front door open to be like, I'm here, deal with me. So with cycle signs, the more you connect with your nature of cyclical living and the more you actually embrace your cycle, you would be so surprised at the rebalancing of your cycle signs. It helps you identify lots of stuff. So one, if you're cycle tracking, I love that you've got a tracker. I think everyone who works with the menstrual cycle has some kind of tracker. But with your tracker, always use a written one over an app, always. Apps are great and they're a good foundation, but written, there's something about pen to paper that's really kinesthetic. So you really want to just be using a written tracker. But start writing down exactly how you feel and stop judging how you feel in your cycle signs for being like, oh, it's another PMS thing. Actually embrace it. I think it starts there, embracing, oh, wow, I'm feeling quite bloated today, or I'm feeling a little bit like this, or, you know, this has popped up for me, or interesting, I've had a headache for the last 3 days. Like these are all things you want to make note of and explore and see if they're repetitive or if they're just one-time things. Like, are these happening all the time, or are they just happening here and there? And learn from your body. The more you allow yourself to live in tune with each of the phases, the more balance you'll create. So the more you allow yourself to just drop into some rest whilst you're menstruating, the more you will have a healthier ovulation. And It does not mean you need to sit in bed for 3 days just drinking your nice ceremonial grade cacao and reading the women who run with wolves. It doesn't have to be that. Resting is just, removing the pressure. Hey, babe, can you cook dinner tonight? And now I've been single a lot of like my menstrual life. So sometimes that's me like batch cooking in my summer and my autumn so that when my winter comes, I don't have to cook.
Yeah.
Like you are your own best friend. Like do it yourself too. But yeah, reaching out and asking for help and support instead of having to do everything and put yourself out so much. That's a great way you can rest. So I like to say that there's 2 ways we can look at how things impact us. So what you did 2 weeks ago energetically and cyclically can directly impact how you feel in your cycle today. And what you've done in the entire last 100 days, which is 3 months, you could say 90 days, 90 to 100 days, is going to impact your overall menstrual cycle health today. So that doesn't just impact, for me, day 28, which is my day today. It impacts my entire cycle. So it impacts my ovulation health. It impacts my ability to track natural fertility. It impacts my ability to menstruate. Am I going to spot? What's my period color going to be like? Is it going to be clotty? Is it not going to be clotty? Is it going to be painful? Am I going to be bloated? Am I going to get cyclical acne? Am I going to have headaches? Am I going to have migraines? So everything we do in our life impacts our cycle. And so if you're looking at improving your cyclical experience, improve your lifestyle.
Yeah, huge.
Just going to drop that seed there.
Yeah, that was a bit of a mic drop moment. I was like, wait, okay, she's finished talking. Wow, all right, that's big. Yep.
Fuck, what do I say now? God, I run out of questions. What I mean by that is that, well, taking it in, like pauses are okay. We don't have to fill all the gaps.
Yeah.
But what I mean by lifestyle is how you live your life, what you eat. So I always say what you put in and on your body is the most important thing. Start there. That's my hula hoop analogy. Start there. Then look at where you spend your time. Then look at how you spend your time. Then look at who you spend your time with. So your lifestyle is a direct impact on how you feel. Everything or every imbalance in health is because or starts because of a lifestyle imbalance. And it starts from your lifestyle. Everything from cancer to endometriosis to cyclical acne, chronic acne to eczema to leaky gut to everything. And so lifestyle isn't just food and how you move your body. It's stress. It's your emotional state. It's your ability to connect with the world. It's your ability to, cleanse and move and eat and nurture and shit. Like, are you even shitting? Like, poo is so important. I can't even just, it's one of the topics I talk a lot about on the podcast. Like, if you don't shit, you die, literally. Yeah. So shit is important. And too much shit is not that good. Not enough shit is not good. You just want to find that Goldilocks happy medium. Like, good poo is good for you. So I didn't mean that to rhyme, by the way. But all of those things impact, like, they're your lifestyle factors. So you want to really explore, okay, where can I, improve my lifestyle? And this is where, if you're looking at doing that to support your cycle, is work with a cyclical coach. Reach out to me and be like, oh my God, I loved what you said. How can I do this for myself? Just working with someone for 3 to 6 months can dramatically change your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is important because it's not, like you said, it's so holistic. It's not just one or two things. It's like very much a lifestyle thing. It's quite, and it might feel a bit overwhelming. So, before we wrap up the episode, I'll definitely ask for some sort of starting practical little tips of, like you were just saying, start with what you put in and what you put on your body, and I would just say maybe a couple of little self-care practices that we can chat about. But yeah, before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of how to actually go about this, I'd love to slot in the segment Get Pregnant and Die.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise?
And basically, yeah, I'd love to hear a story maybe from your own experience or someone you know that wouldn't mind you sharing if you know you've got a horror story around, you know, how your sex education failed you or what you really needed to learn about. And I'm assuming it's going to be menstrual related, but it can be anything.
I love this. Such a good question. It's so nice, like hosting your own podcast and always being the person to ask the interesting questions. I love being asked interesting questions. Okay, get pregnant or die. Interesting. So I really feel that today we have, I don't want to say robbed, but I really feel that we've been, you know, we haven't been given the full opportunity to understand just our bodies. And when it comes to sex education, something that I really feel really fucking pissed off about is that sex ed in schools is really, and I teach menstrual education in schools, so sex ed is not menstrual ed. It's completely different. And it's really just about don't get STDs and don't get pregnant. That's what it is. It's not about like cultivating a healthy relationship sexually with your body. It's not about improving your sexual experiences with others whilst they're awkward and really, you know, learning how to read, is this person right to engage with? Is this person not right to engage with? Like there's so much around that that's just fucked up. And I think for me, you know, I really didn't discover my body, I would say sexually, I felt quite disconnected until my late 20s, you know, even like 5 years ago. Yeah. And I feel that my work and my line of work has definitely helped, you know, reconnect and amplify that experience for myself. But there was just, when I was a kid at school, there was just nothing. And I think that if we think of like get pregnant or die, is that with sex, it really needs to be something that's as openly talked about as menstruation. And I think that the more we normalize it, it's like the pink elephant in the room. It's always quite funny because it's like someone asked yesterday, I was teaching the Q&A for cyclical school after I just taught the first semester, which is on the menstrual cycle. And one of the questions was, how can we help stop period stigma from men? And this particular student lives in the Caribbean. So she's, you know, that it's very patriarchal there. And, you know, the men really lead the communities. And so I just said to her, like, it's quite abrupt, but I'm like, well, when someone says to you, well, oh my God, you're so moody, you must be about to bleed, or, you know, just hurry up and get shit done, even though you're menstruating, like you can do it. I always like, well, you do realize that you exist because of a period. Because everybody on the planet exists because of a period. Because if your birth mother, regardless of if it was your actual mother or a surrogate, was able to grow you and produce an entire fucking organ to keep you alive while she carried you inside her belly, she was able to do that because of her menstrual cycle. So if you're like, you've got something against the cycle itself, then like, do you even have, you know, the right to be here on the planet? Right. Pretty much. It's a big call, but I'm just gonna say that. Because we exist because of cycles, but then secondly, we exist because of sex. Now, I know that it's possible to fall pregnant and conceive without, you know, sex these days, thanks to science, but, you know, we exist because of sex. And it's the two big elephants that aren't talked about in the room. And this is why they're the three topics I talk about in my podcast: poo, periods, and sex, because everybody shits. Ain't no one like, hey, how you doing? How was your shit this morning? People don't ask that question. They just ask, how you doing? You know, people don't talk about the sex life. And like even me, when I talk to my best friend who's recently had a baby and I say, you know, hey, how's it going with her partner? You know, how's your sex? Like, you guys, you know, back having sex? Like, how's it feeling for you after you've had like a natural birth, blah, blah, blah. You know, we openly talk about that stuff because it's an important part of our lives. But most people would be like, oh my God, do you reckon they have sex? Like, how did that happen? You know, when someone's pregnant.
Yeah.
And it's because it's untalked about, but it happens. But it's like, oh no, we only talk about it amongst the people who we're actually having sex with. But I think that, you know, without being completely shadow banned from the entire world, I think it is important to open up conversations around this. So to answer your question, I think that cycles, menstrual cycles, periods, and sex all could be openly talked about over the table. And the more you introduce this in your own lifestyle and your own family environment or your own community, the more we'll be able to remove stigma and taboo. And sex ed at school sucks.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Boom.
Or did I just go on a big tangent?
Yeah. No, love it. You heard it here first, folks. Sex ed in school sucks. Dudes that don't get around the cycle don't deserve to exist. No, I'm paraphrasing.
There's just a lot of improvement that could happen with the menstrual, with sex ed at school. That's what I'm saying. It just sucks. It's needed, but it also needs an update.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, and I mean, like, the way that, even if things are getting talked about, the way that they're being talked about really needs to improve as well. Totally agree with all of that. Love how passionate you are.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm wondering how long it kind of took you to go from like understanding and appreciating all of this stuff conceptually and then actually like living and breathing it. Because I find, like, I feel like for me, like, I nerd out on this stuff. I read so many books about it. I study it as part of my work and just something that I'm passionate about. And because I'm really into personal development and trying to like tweak my lifestyle and how I go about things to optimize, how I feel. But I feel like I'm still very much a work in progress when it comes to this stuff. And, I'll still accidentally push myself too hard during a bleed, and then I'll pay for it and berate myself for knowing better, but still fucking up. And then, I feel like it's this gradual process of getting to know your limits and your needs and your boundaries. And then once you get to know them, like getting better at actually implementing things and like putting things in place to make sure you're protecting yourself and you're doing the right things and the right amount of self-care and this and that. And it really takes like a lot of practice to like dial that in fully. And your kind of whole thing is like, let's unlock the superpower of your menstrual cycle. But like, I feel like, it's a long road for me anyway. I'm not at superpower level. I'm at like really feeling a lot of respect and reverence and like finding it very helpful and valuable to be in tune. And, but I'm definitely not feeling like it's a superpower yet. So like, talk to me a bit about that. Like, how do we unlock our superpower? How long did it take you? How do you know when you like, are you just like feeling like a fucking superhuman once you get to that point, or?
I love this question. This is like, just give me the Wonder Woman-ness. Just pass it to me. Can I put the outfit on? So this is such a beautiful question. And the answer is actually quite simple. And it's interesting because it's a bit of a redirection. I feel a lot of people have the wrong focus. Cyclical living there's no destination and there's no end point. Mic drop. there's no... So we quite often think, okay, when I get to this level, I'll be good. When I get to there, I'll be good. So if I look at me and my yoga practice, I've been a consistent practitioner for 11 years now. So, 5 to 6 times a week, every week I practice yoga. And, I used to think, this is the ill yogic thought, like, if I could just balance a handstand. When I get there, I fucking made it. I'm like a good yoga person if I can do a handstand. And I was like, if I can just do a forearm balance. I was like, I get there. And then sometimes, because I can't do this unassisted yet, but if I can do a forearm stand, scorpion, which is where you drop your feet towards your head and you're in a bend and then you drop over into back bend. I'm like, if I get there, I'm a fucking yogi. But the thing is, I even catch my mind being like, oh, Jema, you're so close to being a yogi. I was like, shut up, ego Jema. Just shut up there. Because there is no end point. And so what we're always looking for is like, okay, I'm going to start my business like this and then I'm going to make this much money. That's masculine. That's start and finish. We don't have that in our menstrual cycle. The masculine approach with food and dieting is, okay, I'm here. This is my starting point. This is my starting weight. This is my goal weight. I'm going to get there. Once I get there, I've achieved it. I've made it. It's all masculine. And your whole cyclical nature is about adapting yourself as a feminine. Yeah, that isn't like the feminine who's like getting her nails done and has the extra ear piercings and wearing flowy, dresses and getting her hair at the salon done, getting a facial. That's not the feminine I'm talking about. The feminine is someone who can like be fierce and surrender and allow and open and raw and real. That's the divine feminine. And when we look at the divine feminine, is we really need to understand that cyclical living is allowing yourself to be a feminine where there is no end point. So it's the same thing in like sex coaching, where you might be like, well, orgasm isn't the destination.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Because sex isn't about, oh, had orgasm, finished, see ya, good catch up. It's not about that. It's about being in the process and connecting. Like this, anyway, that's not my jam, that's your jam. Well, I like it too, but it's your area of expertise.
It's an overlap.
But I use that as an example. Yeah, I use it as an example because there is no destination, and that's because you're in the moment, which is very, very feminine. So when we're thinking about the menstrual cycle, how long did it take me? I actually don't like telling people, because then it gives them an idea of like, oh, well, that's okay. I need to at least give myself this long. Now, I will tell you, of course, but I'm just like preferencing it with like, do not give yourself a time frame, because you're putting too much pressure on yourself and then you're actually creating more imbalance. It's more stressful. So just release all the fucking pressure and just be like, every day I'm working on balance. Every day I'm working on balance. Every day I'm working on balance. So for me personally, I would say, and I actually have a theory on this that I teach in the Wellsome Academy, which is about the 3-year theory. And you need to apply a university degree kind of to your health. You need to give yourself time, because it's not a race. It's about application and learning and trial and error. And like you were saying, some days you're like, oh my God, I was really on this. And then other days you're like, fuck, I slipped that up. And that's because your life around you is not static. So if we lived in the Truman Show and everything was the same every day, then mastering your cyclical nature would be like quite easily. You'd probably pick it up in 3 to 6 cycles. But no one predicted the pandemic. Now that's controversial, but I'll leave that comment there. But, no one was like, oh, okay, so when a massive pandemic hits, here's how to manage your menstrual cycle. There's no way that we could have controlled our body's reactiveness to that. So we can't control, when the rent goes up $90 a week, and we can't control when there's no food in the shops to buy. We can't control when you're having a huge argument with your partner and you're on the verge of ending the relationship and then you go to therapy. Like that's all external. You can't control. The only thing that you can fully control is your response to those things. And that's where cyclical nature takes time for different people. And the length of time is different based on your nature and how you respond to it versus react.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I feel like, it's not linear, and I do need to remind myself to take the pressure off sometimes, because I'll be like, oh my God, I've just gone through this follicular phase where I was feeling like a sack of scrotums, like a sack of sacks, which is that's pretty bad. That's like my low.
Pretty sacky.
Yeah, it's pretty sacky. And I'm like, that sucks. Like I just totally got ripped off. I didn't get my sweet spring phase. Like summer was like a day, and now I'm like plummeting back to, and I'm like, what the fuck? And then I'm thinking, oh, hang on. Well, there's a whole lot of circumstances going on in my life right now that mean that my cycle isn't going to be this clean cut, predictable, I'm not going to get this uplifting, energized, positive, serotonin filled spring and summer, because shit's going down and life happens. And maybe for a few cycles, I'm not going to be on top of it because it's just not possible, and I'm doing the best I can, and that's okay. And yeah, I think it's just important to take that pressure off, because it is, like I said, it's not linear. The cyclic living thing is cyclic in itself, and you're going to just keep going around and around and around and bleeding on it month
100%.
after month. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's important.
You need to understand. Yeah. Everyone needs to understand that whatever's going on in the outside world, whether it's in your home, outside, and I'm talking about outside of your body, is going to impact inside your body.
Yeah.
So to give you an example of how things change. So I'm on day 28 of my cycle. On day 1 of this current cycle that I'm in, that was day 2 of me having the coronavirus. Ooh. And I was sick for 13 days straight. Like I was actually very, very sick. And that therefore changes my cycle. It changes my body's ability to produce hormones. Like everything changes. So using natural fertility to track my ovulation was like all out of whack. And I actually found it more challenging to pinpoint my ovulation because I wasn't, my fertile mucus was just all over the fucking shop, literally. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And, it was just every day it was changing. It was like dry, then slippery, then dry again, and then wet, and then I was moist, and then I was dry again. I was like, what is going on? This never happens in my cycle. But I'm very aware also that, okay, what's going on in my lifestyle? Oh, Jema, you've been sick. Like you had a really bad fever for like 5 days, and then you lost your voice for 2 days. So just give yourself a break. I also lost weight when I was sick. That puts pressure on your body. I, was eating, but I wasn't very hungry. And so all of that changes my body's response. So now I'm on day 28 and I'm like, oh, I'm really interested to see what happens with this next bleed, because what's the color tone of the blood going to be like? What's the texture going to be like? How long am I going to bleed for? And I thought I was going to start bleeding yesterday based on how I was feeling. And then I thought I was going to start bleeding today based on how I was feeling. But like, cervix is still a little bit too high for menstruation today. So I'm the observer of my body. And this is the purpose of me sharing this story with you, is that you just need to become your body's own best observer. And that's my number one goal for every one-on-one client that I work with, is to take them from being non-observant to being the number one observer of their health, like even outdoing me, because only no one knows you better than you.
Yeah, beautiful.
So how can you be your number one observer? And so that's the thing, is like it's everyone's journey to cyclical living and living in that way and being fully connected. It's just being you and honoring your journey.
Yeah, the observation thing is so important, because I'm not naturally super observant. I kind of just get caught up in life and I'm like going from one thing to the next, and I don't really remember what I ate yesterday or what my, mucus was like. So the tracking and having like a hard copy on the fridge where I'm like hand writing stuff in and I'm putting my temperatures in, I'm putting, all of these little signs has been so helpful for me to just be more mindful and get observant. And then I think just making sure we're observant, but we're not like judging or trying too hard to create a certain experience. We're just like, hey, look, like my follicular and ovulation phase this month were fucking challenging. They weren't typical of my usual kind of uplifted state when I'm at that phase. And that's okay. Like I'm observing that, I'm tracking and recording it, and hopefully it's different next month, but it's okay if it's not, because circumstances are going to change everything. And observing is just going to help you. I mean, you barely even have to try. You don't need to change much. You just observe, and naturally you'll start to just have urges to eat a certain thing or get more sleep or do more self-care, just because you are so tapped in to like your state and your experience that you kind of gravitate towards things that are like better for you and are going to be more in alignment anyway, just because of that observation. So what if you're having what about someone who has a really irregular cycle?
Well, this is a great question. If you have an irregular cycle and it's been like that for longer than 3 cycles, because irregular cycles, some people don't know what they are. Like you might be going from like 26 days in length and then going to 32 and then back to 27 and then going to 35 and then back to 26. And so it's very irregular. I always say that, one, just work with someone and figure out what's going on with your body. Like it fast tracks the whole process, but you have to be willing to invest in yourself. And so that does mean financially often. And that's where I would say work with a natural fertility educator. Like there's lots of different labels for that, fertility awareness, fertility educator, natural contraception, whatever it is, to help if you have an irregular cycle, and work with a cycle coach. I do both of those things. But it helps you learn what is going on in your cycle so we can bring back some more of the rhythm. Because think about it like this. if the ocean, which lives on a cyclical nature, high tide, low tide, even super tide sometimes we have king tides, if all of a sudden that like the whole cycle of the high tide, low tide, and the rhythm of water was out of whack, people would be like, what the fuck is going on? Like, they'd be like, something is going on here. We need to look into that. And we don't do that today with our cycle. However, right back to even the Egyptian era, if you were seen to not menstruate, you were seen to be ill. So if you have a menstrual cycle that's irregular right now, reach out for some help. Reach out to learn about your body. Reach out to connect with your body. Reach out to know what's going on. And I could share hundreds of stories about this, whether even if you have an anovulatory cycle where you don't ovulate and you haven't bled for 90 days, it is possible to bring your cycle back. But work with to fast track that. I recently worked with a client who's American but lives in New Zealand, and she hadn't had a bleed in like 3 years. And even just within 3 months of working with her, she was able to naturally bring her menstruation back, because we looked at all of her lifestyle factors that were impacting her body. We looked at all of the things she could do to actually support a healthy menstrual cycle, and that all brought her body back into balance naturally. So it is possible, but you just have to be willing to reach out and surrender, which is the art of the feminine, which is the first step of embracing a menstrual cycle, and allow yourself to receive the help and the support that you don't even just need, you desire.
Yeah, big time. Love that. I think you need to write a book, girl. I mean, there are a lot of great books about this sort of thing though as well. Like, if at the moment it's not financially viable for you to get some help from a professional and your cycle's all over the shop, like there's, The Fifth Vital Sign is an incredible book, like Period Repair Manual. There are a lot of incredibly comprehensive and detailed resources that give you really practical ways to start troubleshooting your cycle. So, it's really worthwhile. So I also have a question, like, what about if, you want to like harness the superpower of your cycle, but you're on hormonal birth control and like therefore don't have a true cycle? Or if you're in perimenopause or menopause, like, do you think there's still benefit to living according to some sort of cycle with ebbs and flows of energy input and output?
100% there is. So if you are not menstruating for any reason, and you aren't on a form of hormonal contraception that gives you some kind of, in inverted brackets, a bleed, I would encourage you to all live cyclically. And you can do that by using your menstrual cycle tracker and connect with the moon. I teach how to do this in my free Labia Cycle Tracker guide. It comes with some videos and how to actually use it and apply it to the moon phases and the moon cycle for those who don't bleed. But for everyone that I've worked with who's been in premenopause and menopause, along with those who have not had a bleed for whatever period of time, using and adapting a cyclical nature is like helping remind your body of the way that it deserves and actually needs to naturally live. And those women who have even been through menopause still living on a cyclical nature actually helps them transition. And a lot of the women that I've worked with who are outside of the menopausal, now they're post-menopausal, they still like to live in a cyclical nature because that's how they've lived for 50 years or really 40 years, because until they menstruate. But so it is really possible. Plus you can continue to deepen that practice. There's a lot of shamanic womb wisdom around that archetype of the post-menopausal woman and using the moon.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. And it's like, because I can't imagine not having that season where I've got an excuse to just chill out, basically. Like, I can't wait till I bleed half the time because I'm just like, oh God, I need a break. I need that winter. I need to have the downtime because it's so unsustainable to just be, go all the time. And I love the kind of ebb and flow that my cycle allows me to ride. And then also just I have it as an excuse when I need to slow down, and I don't have to kind of feel bad about it. I'm just like, no, well, this is literally healthier. It is healthier and more productive right now for me to not do all of those things, which is just nice to take.
Sometimes I have to be like, yeah, it is. Sometimes I have to be like, walk away from the computer, Gemma. You're getting nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. So before my final questions, because I know we've gone a fair bit over time, but, you know, we were prepared for that. It's a big topic. I want to chuck in the segment TMI. We love it.
TMI, we love it. TMI, we love it.
So do you have a story for us, Gemma, where I guess usually it would be considered too much information for, you know, public consumption or general conversation? It's kind of like what you were talking about before with all of these topics. Just if only it was a dinner table conversation, if only, you know, it was like my friends who totally talk about poo, and we call that golden goose, like Goldilocks zone of poo, single loaf, no wipe. Just feel a glimpse into my social.
I love that.
Totally. But yeah, I mean, this segment is all about that. This whole podcast is all about that. It's about, you know, dismantling the layers of taboo and stigma and shame that surround these topics by fucking talking about it openly on public air. So do you have a story that, you know, you'd like to share, you feel comfortable sharing, that is usually probably some people's version of TMI?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind, just because it's related to these topics around too much information, like I've got so many stories from within my life that are like too much information, but you can kind of pick up who I am and my type of personality and how I like to spend time. But the biggest thing that is a lot that I guess was a bit controversial when, and I have talked about it publicly, so this wouldn't be the first time, would be when I talked about my unplanned pregnancy and choice to terminate. And this was an experience that I went through about 16 months ago, so quite recently. And when it comes to that topic, it impacts everybody quite differently. It can trigger people positively, it can trigger people negatively. And so that's why it kind of gets to that stage of it being a little bit too much information, because when we look at, I guess, the process of termination and abortion, whether it's medical termination or surgical termination, it's not a topic that people like to discuss. It's been extremely shamed and tabooed. And it's something that I personally never wanted to go through or never wanted to experience. And I was pretty much given it to me on a silver platter that was fake silver for the situation that I was in. But I think that, yeah, too much information, like way to kind of go around that would be, you know, living through an experience like that in the middle of a pandemic, having to go and have a surgery to terminate a pregnancy that was, you know, through an experience that shouldn't have happened, I was very surprised by, was with someone that I was with in a committed relationship, found out other things are going on, broke up, and then 2 days later found out I was pregnant after breaking up with them on my birthday.
Oh my God.
And then moving forward a week and a half later, going through that process of like, I'm not sure what to do with this, discovering that my brother announced his pregnancy at his wedding with our intimate family around, and no one else knew that I was pregnant. And so, yeah, I think that, you know, when we look at these experiences, I think it's important to talk about them and bring them out as a topic of conversation, because it is something that does happen, and the percentage rates of termination and abortion are huge. And the biggest rate of women who actually have termination and abortion are those in loving families and already have kids and they don't want to have any more kids.
Yeah, so
and
interesting.
That alone is a topic where you and I actually hear from a number of women who reach out to me on Instagram. And if this is one of you, thank you for reaching out. I always leave a voice message to anybody that messages who's going through a similar situation, because I want them to feel as much support from me as they can. But, you know, women saying, I've got 3 kids and we can't afford to have a 4th child, and we love our family dynamic, and my partner and I are in a great spot, but we just can't have any more kids. And there's 2 ways we can look at that. Is that one, you know, they're going to have to go, if that's their choice, you know, they can terminate. We're very fortunate we live in a country where that is an option, and it's not an illegal option, which is great. But that then also comes back to the topic of, and I get asked this question, well, how did you fall pregnant unexpectedly? Like, how can we improve that process? And so that's when I would encourage, you know, learning better about how to pinpoint your ovulation more accurately. And mine was through narcissism. So that's another story, another very long, in-depth story. But, you know, it's about learning how to pinpoint your ovulation and being able to accurately identify when you're fertile and when you're not fertile. And all of that is empowering.
Totally. Yeah. And I would love to do, I mean, we spoke about it earlier, but I think we're going to do an episode in future that's specifically around termination, unplanned pregnancies, because it is so fucking taboo and stigmatized, and that sucks, because it's just, it's so valuable to be able to talk about this and help people going through it not feel so alone, not feel so ashamed, not feel so confronted by this decision that they have to make, and then this experience that they have to subsequently go through, which is not pleasant. So I'm really glad you brought that up, and I'm hoping that we can do an episode on that that'll be really relatable and really accessible and help resource people who are going through this in the future.
Thank you.
So before we wrap up, I just want to chat about I suppose, have you noticed with you and with clients, as people, you work with so many different people, and obviously you would hear incredible success stories and different benefits that they're experiencing through doing these sorts of practices around cycle awareness. Have you noticed a correlation between body confidence and body literacy, and then this being really empowering and helping grow kind of self-worth and self-love around being in this sort of body?
Yeah, massively. The more you understand your body, the more accepting of who you are and how you look, everything is. So your body confidence goes through the roof, literally.
Yeah. So beautiful. Yeah, I've noticed that as well. There's, you just have so much more compassion for yourself and your body, and I guess a feeling of awe and respect, for the processes that our bodies do every cycle. So before we finish, we've kind of covered, we've jumped around a lot and it is a big topic, but is there any kind of really practical tips or suggestions just to send people away with if they wanted to get started with something like this, that they might be able to start implementing straight away, and that might be quite, bite-sized and accessible to kind of start them on their journey with cycle awareness? And maybe we could even just give a few examples of what we do personally, what that can look like in day-to-day life. What do you want to sort of send people off with?
I think the number one thing that I always recommend when it comes to when it comes to all of this is you have to start with the foundation, which is tracking your cycle. Do you do that?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to have a bit of a cough.
No, that's okay.
Okay, let me go back. So the number one thing I would say is tracking your cycle. It's the foundation. If you don't do that, you're not going to even get any insights to your cycle or your body. So everyone can track their cycle in some way. Even if you use an app, it's a great starting place, but then move towards a written tracker is what I would recommend. So I'd say track your cycle. The next thing is, learn about your cycle. Ideally work with someone who's trained in cyclical stuff. As a menstrual cycle coach, I would say invest in that, learn about it, because you will have that education for yourself, but you'll be able to teach your daughters, if you have daughters, or your friends' daughters, or your nieces, and the following generations to come. And plus that knowledge will serve you for the rest of your life. So that's the second thing I'd recommend.
Yeah.
To give you an example, and I can actually share this with everyone listening, great place to start is I have a 5-day mini course. It's called the Love Your Cycle 5-day mini course on my website. It's $29. It's a great foundational starting place. It comes with an ebook and an audiobook and then 5 videos over 5 days of classes. Use the code Cycle Love to get 20% off. So everyone who's listening, you can just use that code and get 20% off that. But that's a great place to start. It doesn't have to be, thousands of dollars to get started, but start there. And then the next thing is just take 2 little bits of knowledge and start implementing them. When you feel like you've got them down pat, then add in 2 more little bits of knowledge. That's the way that I'd recommend doing that.
Yeah, awesome. I love that you I mean, I've got all those links written down in the code, so I'll put them in the show notes too, but I always remember, like, in your episodes where you talk about this, and it's like, it's basically the price of a vegan burger. Like, it's so accessible, and like, yeah, it's cheaper than
a vegan burger.
Yeah. I've obviously spent many the inner autumn vacuuming the house with your podcast in my ears.
I love it.
Yeah, I love that. It's really accessible nowadays with resources like that and people like you and the books that I mentioned earlier, podcasts like this. And, like, just to put my little 2 cents in, some of the things that I talk about with my clients, if they want to get started, just to give them some like inspiration. I think it's often it's easiest for me to think of things that I do around that sort of inner autumn premenstrual phase and when I'm bleeding. But I'll just really ramp up the self-care. So I do castor oil packs like leading up, and I'll have lots of baths, and I don't do as much work or socializing. So I actually like try to schedule, my things around my cycle a little bit. And yeah, just things like that are really small little tweaks can help you just feel like, oh my God, look at me go. I'm having a bath and reading a book. And, that's something really self-loving and self-caring that I'm doing for my cycle. And then it becomes addictive. You're just like, oh my God, this feels so good. Like, I feel so healthy. I feel so self-loving. And it becomes like a really fun game. Like, how can I live more in alignment with my cycle? Where am I at in my cycle? What can I eat that's going to be the most nourishing for me right now? Or what can I kind of plan in my diary that's going to be the most nourishing? And I love it. I fucking love it. Thank you so much. Any final words you want to leave people with, or are we having a wrap? What do you think?
I was just listening to you share all the things you love. Like, I could be here for a whole hour talking about all the things that I do, but just do what you feel called to do is what I would say to wrap up. And just remember, it's a complete rite of passage to know your cycle and embrace your cycle. And it's one of the most important lost arts. It is an art to live cyclically. And we've been doing this for generations, and cyclical living is a remembering, a reawakening. It's not something that you've never done before. Every single person who takes either cyclical school and becomes a menstrual cycle coach through my training program or training school, or joins the Wellsome Academy, which, might I just say, when you talk about a vegan burger, it is cheaper than buying a bottle of freaking water a day. Like, literally, it's so cheap. So it's like, everyone is like, oh my God, this just makes so much sense, and everything just feels so in alignment with them. And that's because you're not learning this for the first time. Your cell makeup knows this stuff. Your soul knows this stuff. So it's a complete remembering. And I think that one of the best things we can do for what I'm calling and marking is my mission of the menstrual revolution, is that we need to revolutionize how we approach the menstrual cycle today. And the more women and menstruators and supportive male people out there that help embrace this and support cyclical living, the more harmony I really believe we can have in the world, because we have more harmony within. So That's my little rant to
Yeah.
stop on that.
Oh my God, so many mic drop moments. Damn, girl. Love it. 100% agree with that. That was a really beautiful way to end this podcast and wrap up, the gist of what we've been talking about. So I hope people have found this really insightful and inspiring. Obviously, you can get in touch with either Jema and I to chat about this stuff. We can clearly wax lyrical for hours on end about it. And just before I end, I want to remind you that I now have Labia Lounge merch, and I've chucked some masks on there now. I used to be repping the Labia Lounge fanny packs. Now I've created some masks.
Nice.
Since, the state of things doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. And in WA here, we actually I haven't seen a single mask since I moved here 7 months ago, but we've just had to start wearing masks again. So I'm like, oh shit, maybe I should make some Labia Lounge masks. I need to make some fabric pads, but no print on demand drop shipping company seems to make fabric menstrual pads, unfortunately. But maybe that's a business idea down the track.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jema. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome.
And hopefully I'll speak to you soon on another epi in the future.
Would love that. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye, everyone. And that's it, darling hearts. Thank you for stopping by the Labia Lounge. Your bum groove in the couch will be right where you left it, just waiting for you to sink back in for some more double L action next time. And in the meantime, if you'd be a dear and subscribe, share this episode, or leave a review on iTunes, then you can pat yourself on the snatch, because that, my dear, is a downright act of sex-positive feminist activism. And you'd be supporting my vision to educate, empower, demystify, and destigmatize with this here podcast. Also, I'm always open to feedback, topic ideas that you'd love to hear covered, or guest suggestions. So feel free to get in touch via my website at freyagraph.com, or say hey over on Insta. My handle is Freya_graph_YMT, and I seriously hope you're following me on there, because damn, we have fun. We have fun. Anyway, later labial legends. I'll see you next time.